Good evening, everybody out there.
Yeah.
Tonight's subject is unalienable rights, and the fact that most of America hasn't a clue what that means. I warn you, I'm known for saying exactly what I think and sharing what I find to be true. So let's explore that. On July 4th, 1776, Congress, such as it existed then, adopted our most sacred founding document, the unanimous Declaration of the 13 United States of America. Today we refer it simply as the Declaration of Independence. But how many of us truly understand what its purpose was, what it means, and what's contained in it, and why not? Today most people will simply tell you, well, it was our country's declaration to the King of England that the colonists didn't want to be part of his kingdom anymore. While that's certainly true, it doesn't exactly describe the contents of the document, nor the principles contained therein. The first clue that we don't, as a nation, have the slightest understanding of our founding documents is contained in the title, the Unanimous Declaration of the 13 United States of America. Wait a minute. Weren't we taught that before the Revolutionary War, this nation was comprised of 13 colonies of Britain? Weren't most of you out there taught that this country only became a country with the writing of the Constitution and the formation of a central government? How many listeners out there even realize that the Constitution was never presented to the people, ratified by the people, nor were the people consulted as to its contents? How many of you understand the reason this is so, or that the Constitution is not the law of the land, nor does it pertain to the people? How many of you know that it was the unanimous declaration of the 13 states of America, not the United States, which declared and guarantees your freedom? How many of you know that before the Constitution was even written, there was another document written for the purpose of collective governance in the limited areas they already united 13 states found that they needed to accomplish together, the Articles of Confederation, and that it, unlike the Constitution, did pertain to the people? How many of you know that your rights do not come from the Constitution and cannot be given or taken by any government? So what exactly does the Unanimous Declaration of the 13 United States of America say that we've been taught to ignore? What exactly was Thomas Jefferson, the author of that document, trying to convey to the people and secure for posterity? The heart of that document is contained in the second paragraph. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That when any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Mr. Jefferson took great care to include a most fundamental basic truth which we've been systematically taught to overlook. The fact that our rights come from our Creator, not from any form of government. He says among these are life. Only the Creator has the power to grant life to all creatures, great and small. Liberty. All creatures, great and small, are free to be, to exist, to live in the manner enabled by the nature of their species. The pursuit of happiness. Just as an animal strives to exist in the manner most suited to its kind, in the ways in which it is most content, so too does humanity have the right from birth. There was actually some heated debate at the time over this one, because Jefferson first intended for it to read property instead of happiness. But many of the other founders were afraid that since slaves, both owned and indentured at the time, were considered property, it might render it impossible to abolish slavery at some time in the future. They knew slavery was an issue which would inevitably divide the states instead of unite them, and they realized they needed to leave a door open to address it at a more opportune time. Mr. Jefferson points out that these truths are self-evident. In other words, any moron should understand them. Man did not create them, and man cannot take them away. In the next sentence, Jefferson says governments are made by men, only to secure the rights given by the Creator, and even then, only by the consent of those to be governed. When was the last time you were consulted and asked for your consent to be bound by any law which our out-of-control government simply decides to pass and enforce? How many secret laws have been passed under the guise of government which you do not agree with, had no say in, but are expected to know about, understand, and comply with? Are you even aware that every day of your life you inadvertently violate some law you didn't even know about, which makes you a felon? Today, we have quite literally been taken over by an out-of-control socialist regime. Not by accident, not by natural slow progression, but by cunning plan and patient application of insidious laws, codes, and decrees most of us are unaware of, unless we find ourselves suddenly the victim of the purpose of 1 or 2 or 10. Those involved in this twisted agenda would now have us believe that the self-evident truths Thomas Jefferson spoke of include a lengthy list of material items and or services which are totally the product of human endeavor. We are now told, through absolute idiocy, that the following things are rights. Things like education, housing, jobs, health care, food, energy, and my personal favorite, not having our little feelings hurt or being offended. And a host of other goods and services we're now told are rights instead of things to aspire to or privileges we can also earn. Let's look closer at that list with a measure of common sense. We are led to expect that education is a right instead of a human endeavor. Certainly, we've discovered over the millennia that all people benefit from gaining an education in order to prosper, recognize and make the most of opportunity, and make the most of personal potential. But who creates education? Is it the Creator or is it man? And who decides what should be taught today, the Creator or man? In fact, in this country at least, education has been completely usurped and hijacked to further a geopolitical agenda since the decision by the bankers during the presidential term of Woodrow Wilson that if they could completely control education for 2 generations, they could then control the whole of society, and thus was born the Federal Department of Education. It took them until 1965 to really get it done, and until around 1974 to put the final nails in the coffin of true education. Now, the purpose of education is workforce training, and it has nothing at all to do with critical thinking, creativity, personal endeavor, decency, moral behavior, responsibility, or the pursuit of prosperity. Today, what we mistake for education is, in truth, total indoctrination to accept the enslavement necessary for a small percentage of humanity to rule over all others under the doctrine of New World Order. Does that make teachers bad? Of course not. Remember The bankers said it would take 2 generations to gain control. The teachers of today know nothing more than what they've been taught, and they can only teach what they know. What makes it worse is that they truly believe, as they were conditioned to believe, that what they're teaching is truth. We did a show on the truth of the educational system in this country a couple of months ago, and Deatra will put the link to that in the chat room. In addition to the information I provided on that show, I have recently acquired a document entitled Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, an introduction programming manual used at the CIA Training Center. All of its contents are beyond disturbing, but the section on the use of education in waging class warfare is of particular interest here. On page 7 of that document, I bring your attention to the following directly quoted. In order to achieve totally predictable economy, the low-class elements of society must be brought under total control, i.e., must be housebroken, trained, and assigned a yoke and long-term social duties from a very early age before they have an opportunity to question on the propriety of the matter. In order to achieve such conformity, the lower-class family unit must be disintegrated by a process of increasing preoccupation of the parents and the establishment of government-operated daycare centers for the occupationally orphaned children. The quality of education given to the lower class must be of the poorest sort, so that the moat of ignorance isolating the inferior class from the superior class is and remains incomprehensible to the inferior class. With such an initial handicap, even bright lower-class individuals have little, if any, hope of extricating themselves from their assigned lot in life. This form of slavery is essential to maintain some measure of social order, peace, and tranquility for the ruling upper class. The quiet war for using silent weapons was quietly declared by the international elite at a meeting held in 1954. Although the silent weapon system was nearly exposed 13 years later, the evolution of the new weapon system has never suffered any major setbacks even today. I want you to let that sink in. What I just read to you was published for the CIA Training Manual and other bureaucratic agencies in 1954. Now, the next right they try to tell us we have, housing. Well, now this one's just plain silly. Since man's been on this planet for thousands of years before housing was even invented, how can it be that the Creator intended for him to have a right to a house, a tent, or even a cave? Man was created with all the tools he needs to acquire those things which he perceives would make his existence easier. It didn't take too long, relatively speaking, for man to figure out how to construct shelter, whether it be from grass, mud, or blocks of ice. This is one obvious reason the Creator included intellect in man's grand design. Should we care in modern society when those without homes are in need of shelter? Well, of course we should, because we're also expected to understand common compassion for those less fortunate. Does that mean we as a society owe them a house? No, it does not. It means we should reach out a hand up, not a hand out. If you give a man a fish and then leave him alone, sooner or later he'll starve to death. If instead you teach him to catch his own fish, he'll prosper, at least in the area of feeding himself. Here again is evidence of the consequences of abandoning true education and the teaching of common decency and morality. Today, we have literally millions of people who actually think they are owed a prosperous life and a nice house just because mama thought they were cute or somebody didn't potty train them right. Nobody should be homeless, but everybody should earn their own roof. The challenge to society is to provide enough opportunity to earn, not to take, from those who earn, and give to those who won't.